Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody, or those of y'all that are watching this later, good morning. This is gonna be, gosh, I believe this is gonna be part three.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, part three. We had a very great part one with Mr. Gary Harrington, and he was discussing his time in the Marine Corps, his time with Special Forces, as well as his time with Delta, and he was also covering, which was very interesting. Got a lot of good feedback and a lot of play on that about his time at Tora Bora fighting Bin Laden and the initial battle with American forces going against the Taliban with the remnants of the Northern Alliance and groups that were against the Taliban. So that was very interesting, and we're going to have some really cool stuff we're going to be covering today. The last visit Mr. Gary had with us was a full-on hour and a half long Q&A session, and I've linked that in the show notes as well as the other appearances by Mr. Gary. So if you had any questions, go ahead and start getting them in. But if you wanted to see him just answer some that other people had, check out the last episode. But Mr. Gary, I hope you're doing quite well today. And where do you think we should begin? I think we were finishing up with you guys getting off the mountain and you hooking up with somebody else and heading to another strange area.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sorry for listeners that this seems to be taking a long time to walk through a
No,
bunch
no,
of stuff that
no.
happened. But yeah, I think we talked about Tora Bora and Jawbreaker Team Juliet and leaving that, and just there are a lot of people that have talked about Tora Bora. There's books on Tora Bora. Uh, I guess I would like to just to close that out by saying that when you're in a battle, the battles aren't like you think, where it's a small terrain piece of ground, like maybe you would think in World War I or two. When we're talking about like particularly Tora Bora, you're talking about the mountain range and valleys, not one valley, but the main Tora Bora Valley, and then the one on the right and the one on the left, and all those, thousands of meters tall ridge lines in between. So we were all in different places. So the book that came out by Dalton Fury, right, that's told from one perspective that, we were on OPs, that then the observation post, when you look at those mountain ranges, we went up there well before the main force ever pushed up the valley. And while, like, just to orient people where you're looking, I'm pretty sure that the valley that you're looking at there isn't the main Tora Bora Valley where people pushed up. It is actually over that ridge line on the left and on the other side of that. So this one, like the mountain, like where you're hovering now, go straight across to that other ridge on the left. Keep going to that top, right there. Stop. Somewhere, that mountain right there, somewhere in that, is supposedly the mountain that had the caves at the bottom where bin Laden was. That's what our best locational information gave, where he was in early December, late November, early December. And so there are tunnels like coming out from different places, right? In the other valley where were the most of the tunnels, but some on this valley. So we were dropping ordnance, calling in bombs to try to hit those openings and places, and people would squirt out through into this valley and go up and down. And the way we're facing, where we're looking, is generally southward oriented. So what you're looking at those very distant mountains would be Pakistan. So we're facing towards Pakistan and the route by which we believe that bin Laden disappeared. But we were up on those mountains, so we could see way down as the ridges got lower behind us. So we could see way down to, more level ground. And it was kind of interesting that the day that people talk about when the main force showed up, I mean, people in the OPs had already been up there quite a bit of time.
Yes,
and we saw these people coming from way far back, and it was odd because you had, I think the locals had a couple tanks that they had, old Soviet tanks that they had acquired somewhere, and they were rolling up in them, and in some trucks, and in locals, and then the part of the jawbreaker team, and which included the SF guys from ODA 572, some of them that weren't up on OPs then, and
I forgot. I don't mean to interject, and I don't know if this was asked at the beginning, but I know somebody actually did send this in. Were any of the British around at this point?
Yeah, the Brits were, and I'm not sure what days they occupied stuff, but they were working with a different warlord who had what you had seen in that picture, kind of supposedly the backside kind of covered. I can't remember what that warlord's name was. I thought it was something with a W, Wahid, or I cannot remember. And but I didn't interact with any Brits until the day after this supposed surrender happened, and I went to search the Al-Qaeda prisoners that were taken in Tora Bora. I don't know how they wound up with the warlord that I think was working with the Brits, if I'm remembering correctly. And I remember driving in a truck to a different location up in the mountains to go search those people. But so then like we're watching way back in the rear, this column start to move up, and that's the one where the people that wrote the books and all that stuff were, and they were firing. They had a couple artillery pieces. I think the tanks would fire once in a while, right? Was it effective fire? Hell no. And we'd already been bombing the heck out of the mountains for days and weeks. ROP, we actually relieved. We got in there some people from Jawbreaker and some guys I knew that were on a Jawbreaker team from my previous military career, including some former Delta guys that were in one Northern Virginia guy, JSOC guy, that were then working for the agency, were up on the OP that I went to. So I actually went up in early December to relieve those first guys. They didn't have many supplies, and they came down, and then we went up and we're up there. And we were there for the arrival. Like Delta, when we went up, Delta hadn't shown up yet. And so it was all Jawbreaker and this ODA that were assigned to Jawbreaker. So, and my perspective from being on the OP, I've already told you some that people had wrong about who was left behind, and if we abandoned our post or whatever, which because they weren't there with us, and nobody bothered asking us, and if you're not nobody. I think that's one thing when people write books, they should make an effort to reach out to other people involved so that you get those perspectives. But I mean, and that's just the way it is in a conflict, right? We have different perspectives. I don't buy into the woke thing about everybody has their own truth, but you
just have your
what
50-foot span you're in front of you controlling.
Yeah, and what you lived, and like I said, I heard that back in headquarters, sometimes we dropped the bombs, and the people watching on back, in headquarters the military headquarters would see us drop a load of 2,000-pound JDAM bombs, and they would start giving body counts about, well, that,
oh, that had to kill this many or that many.
This many, because we had seen them all. And to be honest,
sounds like Vietnam.
It didn't, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but 23 bodies were found. And you could say that, well, maybe there were others, but they were all covered up in rubble. But let's just say that a very concerted effort was made to look through the rubble, hoping that when his voice disappeared off the radio somewhere between December 6th and December 9th,
one of those bombs got him.
That they got, so they would have been, if they thought that there were bodies buried under the rubble, they would
search,
look for
sure.
So in the end, and then do they have time to drag off? No, not in that terrain. If you've been up there, tried to walk it, no,
it's an incline,
Yeah, and that wasn't happening, and there was never any mass grave found or anything like that. So, to be honest, my opinion is we did not kill many people there, and
they got out while the getting was good, and the rest were holding y'all off.
Well, we heard them. The prisoners I searched, they were really messed up. They were, it was clear they'd been living in high stress, and
I can imagine with those bombs.
Well, and hunkered down in little muddy, dirty caves, because they were just, horribly, nasty and not in great shape anyways. So, but we only got 5. We got 5 prisoners. So I don't know how many people were in Tora Bora initially. In the earliest days, you could see people once in a while moving around.
Would you say in the thousands? Was it 1,000 maybe?
I definitely would not say that. No, not in 1,000.
Several hundred.
Well, maybe, but you can't tell because it was in
so many caves. People with Bin Laden for security and.
Right, and and let's remember, a lot of what we know about Bin Laden all came from radio intercept. So that was why there were experts that knew his voice, so that were listening, so they could identify when it was him. And there was locational information on where they thought those radio
signals were coming from.
Yeah, so that's mainly how we tracked him. Now the other OP, we were further in that one valley over to the right. The other OP was further back towards the rear, but they were more aligned with where they could see up the actual Tora Bora Valley. And so they would have been the next ridge over to our left, but further back.
Oh, wow.
So we were the deepest.
Definitely had the high ground then. Jeez.
But
I mean, look at that. I mean, you were talking about the steepness and how it's not like Vietnam. They could drag bodies off in a heartbeat. I mean, you're not dragging bodies off in this. I mean, that's
no, and you'd have to drag them up and then down unless you bring them out a tunnel and to the valley floor.
just
But
you
even the
getting up
valley
it.
floor is well, yeah, and that's why like the one night where they pulled back, where the locals left us alone up there. You can see down there, and that's so looking straight, if I was looking straight to my left, you would see how steep that is. Where one of the guys saw lights moving down that night while we were alone up there in the bottom of the valley. Well, he wanted to take his rifle and start shooting at the light.
Oh God!
But I was like, if you can imagine how far down that is, and where we are, there's no way you could put effective fire down there. So I said no. The team sergeant agreed that
no shooting tonight.
That's because we're going to give away our position, and we're up here. We don't know how many Al Qaeda are on this same ridge, getting ready, maybe getting ready to attack us. Because why did the locals leave? What the hell? And so if we could have put effective fire and killed people who were bad, we certainly done that. But
not happening.
Up there, you got to be realistic about what you can hit and what you can't. So anyway, that's Tora Bora. So I'd like to,
episode 1 covered it in great detail, and we also covered a lot of it in the Q&A session. So if you're wanting to know more on that, hop over on those 2 episodes if you'd like to get more. But so you end up coming down, you come across, I think that's when you end up crossing paths with some of the more Delta guys that are arriving on scene. What's next for you? Are you immediately leaving the area, or?
Well, we went to the schoolhouse that's talked about while we were up there. The main force took over a schoolhouse that Al Qaeda had used. Down that main ridge that we were on, that sort of towards the valley, the base of the valley was a small schoolhouse. So that's where the Jawbreaker team, Delta guys, everybody set up there. And when we were relieved by the Delta guys on that OP, after we came down, we went to that schoolhouse. And I think we shared last time, I might have shared some of the stories about how bad we smelled and rotten through clothes.
Yes, sir.
All that. So that was there. And then from that, after like 3 or 4 days there, because they're deciding, what do you do now with this special forces team that had been loaned to the CIA? And then it was decided, okay, let's bring them back to Jalalabad, still hanging out in case the agency needed them, because the legal process to loan them to the agency had been followed. So we went to another Al Qaeda safe house in Jalalabad and set up there, and it was better accommodations. It was a concrete 2-story house that that had carpet on some of the floors, so we could sleep in there. And we spent Christmas there. So I guess, somewhere, to be honest, I don't remember. I didn't keep a logbook. The date we came down off Tora Bora, somewhere, I don't know, 12, 16, I don't know. And then we went to the schoolhouse in Tora Bora, and we were there, I don't know, 5 days, 6, I don't know how long. And then we went to the safe house in Jalalabad, and we were there Christmas because I had a cousin, my cousin Delisa, who had mailed a whole country ham.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Wow.
and in those days, all our mail would be by aerial resupply. They were, airdrop with pallets on it. So I get this box, big
Oh, jeez.
box, and open it up. And here's a country ham. Here I am, surrounded by Muslims, and I get a country ham.
Oh God.
Well, for us, it was a bit of home, and I had
Oh
an
yeah.
aunt who actually, since I've been on last pass, my Aunt Louise,
Sorry to hear
also
that.
sent a package that had individual Ziploc bags, and there was a little like reading thing in it, and like it said, "We hope your health." It had like in payday. She used things in sentence, and there was a candy or treat in there for everything that she used in the sentence. And she was kind enough to send enough that I could share with the team. So that night, on Christmas
Wow.
Eve, when everybody's sleeping, you have what we call fire watch, and somebody has to be up and alert in case you get attacked. And when I was on fire watch, I took the package from Aunt Louise and put one beside each guy's sleeping bag while they were sleeping, for their Christmas
A
present.
little Santa visited overnight.
Yeah, 2001. And the country ham was a different story because I'm trying like, oh, how can I cook this? And I try to be sensitive to
The
Muslims and Islam. But I mean, if you've been gone a long time, that sure did seem like a treat from home. So I went to the guy and said, "Can I use your kitchen?" And because the local warlord, they had control of that house, and there were like a few guard people to guard on the outer side. You couldn't ever trust them to be a competent guard, and a cook that cooked for them. Anyway, I got the interpreter, asked, "Can I use your kitchen?" He didn't want me to use his kitchen. I said, "Well, this meat is halal, it's halal." So, and I told him what it was. But I think he wanted to please us. So he said if he didn't eat it, he could cook it. By cooking it, he didn't know how to cook it. He'd just throw it
on the fire,
slice it and throw it in the pan and cook it. But what was odd was, so he did that, and pretty soon the smell of country ham permeates
the
place, and that's not a common smell. And I think that it made everybody, and let's be honest, these warlords didn't treat their guys great.
No.
So they were probably hungry most of the time. And
even if you're not eating ham, that smells mighty good when it's cooking.
Yeah. So I imagine it really made them hungry. And then when they found out it was something like that, because I would have shared it if
they don't wanted to.
But instead it started almost like a little insurrection. They got all upset and came and wanted to have a conflict to me about that. Now
you can't
in their pans. I ruined it, and we were how bad and how I didn't appreciate Islam and all that stuff. And I was like, man, I've done everything I can to respect you, and I did not intend to insult you. But it was like a thing we had to deal with, and that's the thing when you do these working with locals like that, and you don't know them, and you just drop in to a bunch of guys, and a lot of them probably have more sympathy or empathy and sympathy with your enemy than they do you. And so like a little thing over the food could be the thing that tips it over into somebody gets shot. So those are part of the
tiptoeing of special forces
yeah,
and interactions.
yeah, because you're there. You've got a handful of people. There's a whole bunch of them. You're probably a lot better. You're a lot better trained and usually better armed than them. But that's
Not what you want to go do, and
yeah. You can't really ever let down your guard. You always have to be prepared. So
oh yeah.
yeah. So while we were in that schoolhouse right about Christmas or the day after, a radio message came in and it told me that I was wanted. They wanted me to leave that team and come back urgently to get back to Uzbekistan to see the Task Force Dagger commander. And
oh wow.
so I, notified the agency folks and jawbreaker guys and hitched a ride. I am not, I have no idea how I got from Jalalabad to where this plane was. Maybe by then the runways at the Jalalabad airport were fixed, or I flew on a helicopter. I don't know how I got to a agency plane, but I got on an agency plane either in Jalalabad or Kabul and flew to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. And that was tricky because I didn't have any ID or passport or anything.
Nothing. Literally nothing.
But anyway, we got through that, and then the agency had a small helicopter that took me from there to the base in southern Uzbekistan. And I walked in, and nasty as hell, and it was nighttime and or getting about night, late afternoon, night. And by now, when I left, it was still an old Soviet air base, and we were in hangars and stuff like that. Well, now, more and more Army had come in, so there were plywood buildings, and headquarters was set up, and there was a lot more activity and more built up than when I initially came in. And so I went back to the room where they said was the commander's office, and he welcomed me. He talked to me about some admin stuff that went on. He had some questions about. He wanted to hear from somebody how things had gone on the ground in Tora Bora and all that. And then he told me, he said, well, so now you are on another jawbreaker team called Kilo. And I go, okay, are they here? And he goes, no, they're already in Kabul. So you need to get yourself to Kabul, go to the Ariana Hotel, and join up with Team Kilo. They know you're coming.
Is that Nate Chapman? Is Task Force Kilo Nate Chapman?
Yeah. Nate was one of the commo guys on that team. So yeah, I was like, well, can I repack my rucksack? And I gotta change a couple things. And how am I getting there? And he said, well, try to find a flight. So I told him it was urgent. I had to get back into Afghanistan, and there was a Black Hawk, a CH, no, wasn't a Black Hawk, it was a CH-47 had a maintenance problem. So it had been back in Uzbekistan getting worked on. So they had to do, I don't know if they were taking it back into Afghanistan or test flight or whatever. And it was just pilot and crew. And they said they could take me. So I got on that aircraft by myself and rode back into Kabul, and then got out. I think the military people met me and took me to the Ariana Hotel when, which was where the Jawbreaker was initially setting up. And yeah, so I joined up with Team Kilo there, and we spent a few days there at that hotel, which later became the big CIA base, right? So like later on, when I'm a CIA officer and go back to Afghanistan, a few years later, that got built up, and it was the base that where we operated out of primarily. And
FOB Chapman, it didn't become FOB Chapman or something?
I think that is Coast became FOB Chapman. I think Coast, the forward operating base, because anyway, but I spent, so it was sometime between Christmas and New Year that I arrived back in Kabul and was on Team Kilo. And because I recall that by this time the agency brought in a chef, and they were cooking food, and I was like, real food. And we had some rudimentary steak. I think New Year's I had a steak. So I spent New Year's Eve there. And then I think it was probably like January was the infill for Coast. So I hooked up with the team, did some of the prep, reconfigured my gear. They wanted me years and years before in Special Forces. I'd been a medic, and they were needing another medic on that team. So they asked me, besides the duties that I was going to do for the Task Force Dagger commander, John Mulholland, that if I could also back up the primary medic. So the agency, gave me the equipment, sent me to a warehouse full of medical, or they had a big giant room full of all the medical gear and meds and all. And I packed up a medical bag and my other bag and got ready for that. I believe the infill was scheduled for January. And it's really odd that afternoon. It was, of course, infill going to be at night. Some major from the SF command drove up to the gate, wanted to see me. And when I came to see him, he said, Colonel Mulholland does not want you to go in tonight, which I was scheduled to be on a helo to go in that night. And I was angry because, I wanted to be, you say I'm on this team, I'm going to share everything with the team, and I want to be on the first in. And, it's not till actually within the last few years, he gave me the background of why he didn't want me to do that. There were some concerns he had about some things and some disagreement with some people involved. Whatever. But see, technically, I was not legally given by the Army to the agency. So basically, it was a handshake deal between the Task Force Dagger commander and the CIA that they would sort of, wink, wink, nod, nod, loan me to their team. But still, the Army owned me. So in that case, when he said, you cannot go in, I had to obey and had to tell those guys. And it was, so they made that initial infill. And then the next morning, they were going is when they were driving to meet this other warlord that had a lot of guys in Coast, Pasha Khan, that on the way back from that meeting is when the ambush happened that lit up the pickup truck that Nate Chapman and some other guys were in. 2 people were hit. 1 guy got a chest wound, and Nate took some rounds in the thigh. And, the truck rushed back to the building where they had set up in a little concrete former German schoolhouse. And they were fast, but by the time and the medic was trying to put, tourniquet pressure on Nate's thigh, but he bled out. And because it turned out that those rounds, while he had been conscious initially, hit his femoral artery, and so he bled out. While this is going on, I'm waiting because I'm supposed to be on the next helicopter coming in that day. And then, suddenly all hell breaks loose. And a helo comes in that has the medic on it from that team, and Nate's body. And, so I spent time with the medic that afternoon. And then that night, or later that afternoon, that helo took he and I back into Coast. And yeah, we got there, and still team on high alert. The aftermath of everything was there, because remember, it wasn't just Nate that was hit; another guy was hit in the chest. So yeah, it was a tense time, and we were in this schoolhouse, and a lot of things happened then. Again, it's just a few of you. You're in with a bunch of people you don't know, you don't trust. I felt most people later came to believe that Pasha Khan, the warlord that they had been going to visit, was upset because we were originally with supporting another warlord called Zia Khan, and they came into Coast and linked up with him. Well, Pasha Khan wanted all those millions of dollars the U.S. was giving out, so it's thought that he made a power play. And I'm military, so I wanted to take lethal action against Pasha Khan, but these agency teams, back in the Jawbreaker day, while they're mostly filled with paramilitary guys and detailees from the military to beef that up, the people in charge were generally regular case officers, right? With people, anyways, after that fiasco, the agency sent in a more senior agency guy to come in and try to figure this out, because now we had Pasha Khan and Zia Khan who hated each other, and they wanted to fight each other because they were both competing for those American dollars. And those dollars would buy them power, and then they could impose their will on the people and basically get all the graft and profit from that. And that agency guy, we're talking at night, what are we going to do? I wanted to, that Pasha Khan had a thing like a little tower type building that had a plexiglass window on it and some radio antennas. And that's where he was using as his headquarters. And I wanted to give him a Thuraya and get him in that tower on the Thuraya. And I wanted to laser designate a Hellfire missile and put that in there. And that was my suggestion. But, the more senior agency guy who wasn't really military, they decided to shift allegiances and to promise Pasha Khan that we would support him and work with him and give him money. And no, at that time, nobody knew, and we probably still don't have proof that he was the one that did that. But I mean, all the people lining the road on the way to that building and back, that meeting where the ambush occurred, it was his people spaced out. And then maybe he didn't know his people well, but one of those people, as the truck passed, lowered their AK on full auto and opened up on that truck. And of course, they disappeared. You don't know what happened to them, but in the end, he got the agency support and the money. So, and he became a pain in my butt for the next few months. And then years later, ran into him when he was now a parliamentarian, and I still just wanted him dead. But, that's the way it goes. That's one of the differences between agency work and the military. You kind of like to think, I like to think military is kind of the Bushido code, the honorable warrior, where you fight. And then, you get into the type of activities we're doing now. Who's good, who's bad gets blurred. In my time in Afghanistan, I came across a lot of heroin growers and dealers, right? But our focus was terrorism. So you ignored that. And nobody was clean. The people we were working with were horrible, in some cases, horrible people. But anyway, I'm in Coast. We're settled. We changed horses. My job, the reason I was there, was to try to get the Jawbreaker team working with the locals to prepare the locals and organize the locals and equip the locals so that special forces teams could come in and they would have some sort of skeleton unit and chain of command and structure that they could marry up with so they could start training people and go out and do combat operations.
Is this what you labeled as the G force, or
that's what that would be as classic SF training, the guerrilla force. So that's how that all works from the course on. So what the agency was doing was making the initial contact and work out those deals and political deals and who's aligned with us and who's, and provide the money to get things started. And then you would bring in the military. So we were kind of that interim. I've learned in my career to refer to that as a pilot team, so that's what we were doing. And during that time, so now we got two warlords and they have long-term feuds. So they are wanting to kill each other. And each of them is telling the agency, well, this guy's really working with Al-Qaeda. And the other guy says, no, he's working with Al-Qaeda. And they were, threatening to kill each other. And I eventually, I don't know how, but I had more affinity for Ziahan, the guy that they initially came in with. He was a tall, thin, hardened kind of guy from battling the Soviets. Pasha Khan looked like Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars, a big giant fat guy with jowls and his big turban up there, and just a nasty person. And it got tough because it got to the point where we could not move forward with our plan to get a force ready to fight because these two warlords wanted to fight each other. So at one point I gained some respect with him because I had some combat experience in a couple other places in years before. And so I guess we sort of hit it off. I could communicate with him, but I had to go to him and threaten him because, look, I wanted to kill Pasha Khan. I felt he deserved being dead, and this is war. So even if we're not sure he caused Nate Chapman to be killed, we're pretty sure, and this is wartime, and I just felt that. But that's not what the U.S. decided to do. So I had to go to Zia Khan and say, hey, you cannot, because it got to the point where he says, I know I'm just going to kill him. And I had to go to him and say, I'd like him dead too, but the U.S. is going to work with him. And if you decide that he is your enemy, then I am going to be your enemy. And I have an alternative plan, and that would be for you to split off from here. Your hometown is Urgun, and I will if you will go back to Urgun, separate yourself from Khost. Now, and Khost is a bigger town in a more commercial area, so whoever controlled Khost would ultimately get a lot more dollars after the U.S. pulled out, right? Mm-hmm. By the way they would take money and locals would have to pay into them. But he agreed because I said, if you go over there, I will bring special forces in, work with you, will support you. The agency agreed with my plan and said they would send officers to support that and fund it. Monies to be paid to him and to run things up there. So, we did the planning for infill up now in Urgun. That's spelled, if you're looking for a map, with a URGUN in some maps and ORGUN in others. And I know we're kind of running on time, but one of the tricky things of that was, okay, how we can't go up there. It's real far. It's far away in bad guy territory. And so we're going to have to do a helicopter infill, but there's no LZ and we need somebody to work with. So we sent a nephew of Zia Khan. He had a nephew that was, I don't know, hard to tell age on those guys.
It's a very interesting story.
Late teens, early 20-ish, like that. And with the interpreter, I taught him how to pick out a helicopter landing zone, what size I needed, about obstacles and obstacles as you came in to approach. So, and then I tested him on that, and then I taught him how to use, and we taught him how to use the Thoraya, and then had to teach him how to use and set up an IR strobe.
Yes.
And, you know, all those things to somebody that you know,
never even seen a cell phone.
Yeah, uneducated and all that. And so, and then you get ready to send him off because he can travel on ground and go up. And so then it becomes a question of now how we're going to have to make an infill once he finds and calls on the Thoraya and says he has a spot that we can land and a building picked out that we can set up in. How am I going to make sure that we're not going into an ambush? Because there were a lot of AQ still running around, and especially up there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, yeah, he goes up there. How about somebody offers him $1 million
to turn on you
to capture or kill a helicopter full of agency guys?
Mm-hmm.
And so the two things I decided to do was, one, I told him, and when I say I told him, I mean through an interpreter, that he should start marking that landing zone every night between such and such hours, like let's say 9 p.m. or 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., something like that. And then he would never know. I would give him time to get used to us not showing up, so he wouldn't be exactly sure. That, I mean, it doesn't give you a big advantage, but it gives you some if they don't know if you have, they don't know when you're exactly that you're going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And you hope that you do it enough that they get complacent and that gives you more time for your signals intelligence people to be listening to radio traffic to hear if you hear about any sort of plans by Al Qaeda to attack you or something, right? So it just gives you more time. And then the other thing I did was ask Zia Khan if I told him it'd be an honor if some of his relatives could get on that helicopter with me and fly up there as an honorary procession thing. Because I thought, hey, and to be honest, maybe they would kill an uncle or brother or two for that kind of money. But I thought it was a way to kind of ensure that
safety.
We got him. So we did that. We made the infill on the IR strobe. We did the usual things you do about, is it, you know, what I tell people in the helicopter after I get off, if I do this, you know, if I throw myself on the ground, just start shooting over my head. And we made that infill, and so that was the start of the base that stayed in Orgun till probably, you know, just years. It was there all my time in Afghanistan, so I know it was there like through 2010. So at whatever point towards the latter part of the war and the agency started shutting down bases, that was a base that they shut down, but it stayed active probably from, we established it in probably March 2002. Yeah. And so it probably stayed in action 15 years, something like that.
Jeez, wow.
Yeah. And from there, we just did a bunch, it was a bunch, mostly what we did, we were trying to settle the area. We were doing a lot of raids. When I say raids, going out to weapons caches during the 80s against the fight in the Soviets. All the local villages had mines, RPGs, thousands and thousands of rounds, weapons, even artillery pieces hidden in their villages and in caves and under the ground and built into the walls of buildings. You talk about preparing for an insurgency or an overthrow by an external government and being able to fight back. That's how they'd been. And so we were trying to recover that stuff. Sometimes it was, let's pull up with trucks and guns drawn and take what we need. But I discovered that nobody at that time, nobody stayed to fight us. Most of them, people pulled out. They thought things were hidden. And like the one place where there was one compound, we just took stuff. The people were gone. But what I found is that we would use intel and an system of informants that would give info on a little village that would have stuff buried. Mm-hmm. What we developed was that originally it'd be like a couple of us would go out with some local, with our interpreter and a local guide. And we would go to the village, and not in a threatening way, weapon behind your back. And we were not kitted up. You've seen the pictures. I was dressed in local clothes. And we would go up and just negotiate with the senior elder guy in the village that, hey, there's some bad stuff here. That stuff's not good for you. It's not good for us. We feel it's a threat. We would like to honor you and treat you in a way that is respectful, but we would like you to help us find this stuff. And then, because the first couple of times we offered them some little bit of money, that didn't help. But what really started working was we would have off in the distance a big Jenga truck loaded with mattresses and blankets and rice and beans and stuff for them that they could really use. And it was cold. And when they would show us where stuff was or recovered stuff, we'd roll those trucks in. And it got to the point where I started collecting an artillery collection back in Orgun. And I wish I had the photo, because at one point I had it, because I started, arranging the artillery pieces in like a herringbone thing. And sometimes you would get so much stuff, like I would be paying local guys with their tractor to hook up to an artillery piece and drive it to Orgun to collect it. And we were just so many mines and all this equipment. And it got to the point where we'd be pulling stuff out of one village, and some local from another village would come when he saw how we treated them and say, hey, we have stuff in our village too. Come to our village. Come and take it from us. But that's effective. You can't, not everything. You're a warrior. You're prepared to fight your way out. You're prepared to fight your way in. But in low intensity conflict, if this wins the day, then that's fine. I'm not looking to arrest somebody or everybody in a village that might have known about stuff that's been buried there 15, 20 years, right? So, it worked. I guess two interesting stories from Coast are that we'd load up these Jenga trucks full of all these explosives and ammunition and all, and a lot of it's unstable, no protective coverings. So there's always that possibility that something would go off and you'd have a cataclysmic explosion. And I had witnessed one of those in Yemen some years before. And it's the times I was accompanied by like another American, we would get in our truck and the Afghans would pick their lowest two dudes, you know, usually unfortunately the youngest and most uneducated, and they'd put them in the truck and make them drive the truck of explosives back to the rear. And I started thinking about that. And one day I told the other American, I said, you know, I'm going to go with the gear. So the two Afghans were in there and I went and knocked on the door because I didn't speak the language. And they were playing a little handheld cassette player because with us liberating them, they could now listen to music, which the Taliban had made illegal. And I told the guy, I just motioned, move over. And then, and I didn't move over. And I just climbed in the truck beside him. And they looked at me like, what? And then all the other Afghans and Americans said, you crazy. But, yeah, I rode with them. And I did that because I wanted them to know that we're invested in you. And I'm not asking you to take a risk that I'm unwilling to take. So I went there, and that made a difference because, like with me, the locals started treating me deferentially. They started treating me as like a leader. I would always offer to help. I would try to help unload the trucks, and while they would get upset and come to me and like, no, move me off to the side. And there's a selfish reason to that too, because you hope that establishing that personal conviction or connection with somebody, let's say that they heard that their commander was going to give us over to the Al-Qaeda.
It comes straight to you after that.
Up, and maybe there was enough of hopefully it'd be enough of a connection that somebody would give me a heads up and help save our lives. Yeah, and it's connected. There was like this tribe of people were tall and thin, and there was one like giant dude. He was like, I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating now, but like 6'6", really big, bearded Afghan. When they were all mostly small, and his AK looked like a little toy in his hands. And he was extremely simple and uneducated, but he started like wanting to take care of me. He would cook tea for me. Yeah, like that. This guy would be like, none of us in that picture would come up to this guy's shoulder.
Holy cow.
And this was on a later Jawbreaker team, that picture. So he actually, the day that I was told to leave there, because I got another radio message saying, so now I've been with Juliet, Jawbreaker Juliet in Jalalabad and Tora Bora. Then I'd been with Kilo, gone to Coast. Now I broke off and went to Urgun. So that's like 3 teams. Then I got a radio message at some point after I brought other SF guys in to start working. But then I got told that now we're putting you on another Jawbreaker team. So you need to get back to Kabul and yeah, we'll tell you where you're going next. And and then the last story from Urgun is that, you know, I think I said last episode that I rotted through my first set of clothes and was on my second, and nasty. And I'd been talking about that and wanting to get my beard trimmed. Like a lot of, if you see the pictures from those early days in Afghanistan, a lot of people had the ZZ top looking beard.
Yeah.
I didn't have a ZZ top looking beard. And if you want to be a respected, like a warlord, your beard needed to be trimmed. So I asked the warlord that, and again, I'm dressed like in the blanket that was in one of your pictures. He said, yeah, there's one place to get a bath and you can get a haircut and your beard trimmed. So I went with him and a couple other guys, and it was like watching a cowboy movie. We went to some wooden hut on a dirt street on the side, of Argoon. So it's just like watching a cowboy movie, right? When they go down the dusty street and you pull into the bathhouse. And we went in here, and again, it was cold. So there was a little potbelly stove and the guy cutting, hair. So I sat down in just a regular chair, and this guy, the warlord, and him talk. And he gets out scissors. I don't know, maybe a razor, whatever. Yeah, that's me. And so that's how I was dressed. And so I get my beard trimmed and I get a haircut. And then he said, well, you can take a bath if you want. But now I'm a little bit nervous because, it's just a bunch of dudes and me, and they want to take a bath but me. And but it was kind of like the old bathhouse, because in this shed, there were like 4 or so little booths that had a curtain. And up in one corner of the room was like a truck gas tank that had been cleaned out, and they would heat water. So just like the cowboy movies, they would heat water at the potbelly stove, and they would add that to cold water in the gas tank up here. And then there was a pipe that ran around to these different booths. And then there was a spigot you could turn on in each one. So you wouldn't get a shower, you'd get a spigot. But hey, it was warm water. I hadn't bathed in a couple months or 3 or something like that. It was some amount of time. So I went in there, and I felt odd because I got all these local men standing out there. At least I had the curtain, right? And I'm sure you've heard the story. So I'd seen, their lonely men being with other men was not a unusual thing. So I was, and when you're in a shower like that, and I'm there by myself, you're a little bit vulnerable if somebody decides this is the time to
take my chance.
Yeah, kidnap him or kidnap him or whatever else. But that was my cowboy movie bathhouse experience. So then I went back. I told you I got notified to leave coast. At some point, there were several other military people that had come. We left, and we actually drove from Argoon. I said coast, but I meant Argoon. We actually drove up from Argoon all the way to Kabul in our pickups. We got back. I got put on. I was told I'm now going to be on Team Hotel, Jawbreaker Team Hotel. And this was in preparation for Operation Anaconda. And my job on Team Hotel was to be the tactical leader. The agency got pressed so thin with so many teams doing so many different things that there wasn't a tactical leader. And our job was to sit on, guess who? Pasha Khan. He tried to use his power in coast and get himself made governor of Khost.
Oh my God.
Citizens rejected him.
God.
So now he had relocated with all the money the U.S. gave him, and armed himself up with some artillery pieces and stuff. And now he was outside Gardez, and he wanted to be governor of Gardez. So those locals didn't want him to be their governor. So he was actually lobbing artillery shells at people in Gardez to force them to make him their governor. And, you know, war makes strange bedfellows, and we're going to, you know, by now he wasn't trusted, but he was a player, and he had a group of armed men that followed him. And in the run up to Operation Anaconda, nobody wanted him trying to insert himself somewhere and gumming the works up, right? The U.S. was already paired with who it was going to be paired with, and everything was pointing towards Operation Anaconda. And for 5th Special Forces Group, the first in, this would be their culminating operation, because by this time, other special forces groups were coming in to relieve us and take our place.
Mm-hmm.
So since I knew him, since I had known him, they teamed me up with the agency's team leader, who was and I would run the tactical side of things and help him, since I knew this guy, keep my eye on him and make sure he didn't mess things up. So that was my last team there. And that photo you showed with me standing with 2 guys, that was made, and we set up there outside Gardez, because there's another agency team in Gardez, and we were somewhere out in the outskirts up in the mountains, and that's where we set up. And yeah, see, what can I say about that place? Some other SF guys came, and that is the guy. That's the warlord that began with a W. Somewhere I have a picture of him that we were linked up with at this point for physical security. But the case officer who was in charge of our team also had contact and was the agency's contact with that Pasha Khan. And he controlled certain areas, right? He had a big following. He had posters of himself up. When you went around that part of the Afghanistan, there would be posters up of him. And big hawk just landed outside my house. So one of the things that happened was that was actually Khost. After, I said that we went into this initially into a German schoolhouse. After Nate was killed, myself and some others were sent out to look for a new place to locate. And this was a compound attached to the airfield, which became known as Chapman Airfield.
Oh.
And FOB, and then later FOB Chapman. And there was some local, I didn't know Afghanistan had monkeys till one morning early on in Khost, my first night there, the night of January 3rd. I'm pulling fire watch in the early morning, and I look out the window, and I thought, you're real sleepy, and it's just getting dawn, and I thought, I'm seeing something, because I thought I saw a monkey. I'm like, I'm in the mountains of Afghanistan. It can't be or in a valley in Afghanistan. It can't be a monkey. That's Africa and Asia. And I another guy got up, and I had the coffee going already as I'm getting people up. And I said, "Hey, man, I thought I saw, you're going to say I'm crazy, but I thought I saw a monkey." And then sure enough, a guy saw that. And then later on, there was a guy we were paying to come out and spray water on the dirt so the dust wouldn't be so bad. And he had this monkey chained to his water tank that he pulled with his tractor. And I didn't like I saw it being
drug around.
So I gave a guy $15 and bought that monkey. And
wow.
That's the monkey that became famous. There's he's mentioned in the hunt for bin Laden and stuff that they said they heard the agency had that. And
that's that monkey. Holy cow.
And later somebody else bought a young male. And so I've got a bazillion pictures of the two of them together. We don't have time to talk about the sad ending to those monkeys.
Oh, no, don't. Yeah, please don't.
I had hoped to bring that monkey home, but unfortunately, I got sent off to another team and had to leave him in somebody else's hands, and that didn't go well. But he became famous, and everybody, all the military that came in to provide security, everybody wanted their picture with the monkey. It bit a couple people. It bit me.
As they're known to do. I mean,
jump on you. I mean, we had him tethered. There was a little tree, and he might be 15 feet away, and he'd decide to use you as a
landing pad,
go to somewhere else. And she was not little.
I know. Good Lord. Look at her. She was on your chest and looked like a nearly grown child.
Yeah. And, but I don't know. I could handle. I'm pretty good with animals anyway. So anyway, that was.
Is this around the time to where don't you around this time? Aren't you about to switch theaters and start AFO in Iraq?
I finished in Operation Anaconda went off, and we kept that. The only thing of significance that happened. Well, two things. I did plan on killing Pasha Khan. I dreamed the whole time I stayed out there of ways to kill him, because just seeing him and thinking about Nate getting killed and all, so I tried to find a legal way to kill him, and thought I had a way initially, but the team leader stopped me in the middle of I tried to provoke an incident between he and I, Pasha Khan and I, and then I was going to use my military, because I wasn't really agency, right? I was going to use my military
fall back on that and use it as
a rule of force or whatever, lethal force criteria, and which said if I felt threatened, I could eliminate
enemy combatant kind of situation.
So yeah, I tried to provoke him into that, and then got stopped in the middle of trying to provoke him.
Wow.
But then, and then we say that, yeah, I was going to kill him right in front of all his men, because I was confident that that if I did, the other Americans there, they would have my back, and these Afghans would say, well, who's going to mess with them if they do something like that. But later on, Pasha Khan set up a meeting with that case officer out in the middle of this valley. So it was a flat plateau, and there were just a small little group of buildings, maybe 4 little tiny shacks in the middle of it. And he had said he was going to meet us there, and they were going to meet. So we had driven a long way. It was from up in the mountains where we were down through the mountains onto this plateau. And it was kind of a vulnerable place, because you're on this plateau and there's nothing around. It's just flat ground. And, there were probably 5 shooters and the case officer. So what, 6 Americans, 7, and we pull into this place, and I'm telling him, man, this is not a great place. And we start waiting, and it just feels wrong. You just felt wrong. And there were very few locals around. And then I just started noticing that people were disappearing.
Oh no!
I started getting that feeling like like you watch an old Western movie, and
people are hiding, and a shootout's coming.
People are like
Closing the windows
and yeah, we had, we got there, and I put the shooters in a little perimeter, and we were ready to try to defend ourselves. But we waited, and I forget how long. I don't know how long we stayed, and it just got where it just seemed bad. So I went to the team leader. I said, "Hey, I think we might be being set up. This doesn't feel right, and we're in a vulnerable position, and people are gone, and we're kind of hanging out here, and he's not showing, and we got to go." And he's like, I need to do this meeting. And I said, well, okay, look, I mean, it's his call. He's the case officer. It's his team. It's his call. He was kind enough to listen to me. And I said, hey, let's give it, I forget whether I said 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, more minutes, and then let's out of here. And we left. He didn't show. We left. And that evening, he came back to me, called me in, said, hey, the NSA Signals Intelligence picked up Al-Qaeda radio communications while we were there. And it was coming from that area right there, saying that they had their ambush in place, but they were waiting on the others to arrive to help complete it. And then you guys were going to get hit.
Oh man.
And so basically we walked out, we drove back out where they did not have it closed up yet. That would have been the last place, and got out before they could do that, their ambush. So but that's, again, that's how it is in a place like this, right? It's not certain. So we go back. I go back to Kabul. I leave. I had been one of the original first SF guys to go into Afghanistan. I was the last 5th group guy to come out.
Wow.
The task force commander met me he was nice. We got fairly close right at that point. And when I came down the ramp of the C-17 and came out on, he met me, and we chatted a few minutes, and ultimately came back to the States. By this time, they told me that based on some previous work I had done in 2000 in the Middle East, that the CIA had requested me to be officially loaned to the agency to do some work in the run-up to the invasion of Iraq. So we went back to the home. I got to go visit my kids, my immediate family, take some leave. And then I had to start preparing and training and getting clearances to go through the legal process to be chopped from the Army to the agency to go where I ultimately went. So I came out of Afghanistan. I went in November of 2001. I told you I flew back like for a few hours to Uzbekistan. The rest of the time I stayed in, and I left in April of 2002, early April. And then by that fall, late summer or fall, I was back in the Middle East, and now, I'm doing some cross-border type stuff for the war. Some. I had a regular job. I was assigned to an embassy and had a regular job there. And then a couple nights a week, I would go up and do ops in the desert, where I would go out and do the tactical part. I wasn't doing the asset part, but I would handle the part of, let's go into a dangerous place and meet some Iraqi and bring him back to some secret place where he's debriefed and prepped, and then get him back into Iraq without
them knowing
them or anybody, including
the public or
allies, our allies, because now nobody is,
trusting anybody.
There's still no war. It's still not decided that officially that we're going to war. So do that. And then I worked with, I had a handful of non-military Kuwaiti they were cops, very, very untrained, very inept. And one other American who was a case officer, non-military case officer that I worked with. So I did that from 2002 and got my taste of regular embassy work. And it was really interesting while I was there. The task force Dagger commander, John Mulholland, who now was General Mulholland, showed up at the embassy, and he got assigned to that embassy. And he was the guy that sent me to be on it. So we reunited, we worked in different offices, but
it's crazy how he pops up again and again like this.
Yeah. Well, you find in combat or in this life, it's the same people. One of the main guys, there was a Marine officer named Greg that we were platoon commanders together in Recon Battalion in the Marine Corps. I ran into him when I was in Gardez and got reintroduced to him. And
he kind of gives you the lay of the land and everything.
He knew me from the Corps, so, and welcomed me. And then he showed up where I was in 2002, because he was now a senior guy in the Special Activities Division, and he was there to kind of oversee the agency's combat prep role and all that. So he and I reconnected again, and John Mulholland and I reconnected again, and worked with him. And then he later became my first chief of station when I actually became a CIA officer a few years later back in Afghanistan. Anyways, 2002 to 2004. So 2003 is the invasion. I started rolling up into Iraq. Before I was at the border before, and then I would go in, and as the combat ops were going on in Basra, Nasiriyah, as we were approaching Baghdad, I for different reasons went in to those places. And then once we got into Baghdad, I would go up there from a few days to a couple weeks at a time, and was doing some intel gathering up there and some tactical stuff. Let's see, noteworthy things during that period. Once there was supposedly a terror cell in downtown Baghdad, located near this big shrine, Shia shrine in Baghdad. And these are the early days. This is early days. And we wanted to try to verify the location and to see if we could plan something or get the military or somebody to hit later, but we weren't sure about it. So SEAL and I decided to do a drive-by. So we got in a rusted out Toyota Corolla, an armored car, and just the two of us. And I was driving, and we roll, and we get to near where this area is. And I was like, hey, this street's blocked off. So I backed off and boxed around and tried to come in from a different angle, because that where this was on the same block that surrounded this big shrine, big giant shrine, mosque and shrine. And I forget who was buried there. It was a shrine. It was somebody famous. And all the roads seemed to be blocked off. And I was like, yeah, man. But hey, I've been in the mobility troop in Delta. I could do off-roading and stuff. And I found this alley back behind the shrine that had a drainage ditch in it. And I straddled that ditch with this car and wedged it in there and got through, right? So I worked around behind the shrine, and now I go from behind the shrine to around the corner towards the front, so I can get out on the road and come back. And as we turned, now I saw why the roads have been blocked off, and I had seen some of the roads were blocked off with buses. We rolled up on thousands and thousands. When I say thousands, tens of thousands of people, because I did not know this happened to be a shura. And the Shia had been locked up and mistreated by Saddam, and they were going to have their day
and celebrate.
And it was not just prayer, it was just a giant mass and throng of people. Now here's two Americans suddenly in the middle, because now there's nowhere to go.
This sounds like the way you're describing it, and it's haunting footage, but it sounds like the incident where the two Brits got the IRA.
We studied that when I was in Delta, so that was in my mind. Immediately I was like, oh crap. And I couldn't back up, because it was just to try to do what I did to get out there over that ditch and all. It wasn't going to work. So real fast, I just said, okay, I probably wasn't wearing a vest. But anyway, we had a camera up on the top of the dash. I said, grab the camera, throw it down, take off our outer shirts and cover up the rifles. And we set the rifles down beside us and covered them up. And what can you do? By this time now, the crowd is coming over us, just waves of people coming all around us. And yeah, you think I've had the driving training, like try to gun it. You cannot. You could, maybe I can run over 5, 10, 15 people, but there's thousands I would have to get through.
The car can't run over that many.
The car's going to get hung up, and we're just going to be like those Brits were in Ireland. And
jeez, yeah.
But it's really funny, because people would be shocked, and then they look in the window and they'd see two Americans, and honestly, I did my best Gomer Pyle imitation, and it would be like, I said, just do what I do, and it'd be like, hi, and then just
I don't know why I'm here.
I don't know why. Hi, and then they look at you and they'd scowl, but then there'd be some older person that would, tell the people around, let them inch forward.
They're dumb. Let them through. Just let them
through. Well, because nobody's in control. And so we'd move a few feet, and then you had to redo it because now it's another group of people plastered over your windshield, and you do all this again, and and you're just like, and eventually you edge. And it took us like 45 minutes to get through that crowd and out. And it's so funny because you're breathing deep when you come out. And we had seen a couple military helicopters fly over. Of course, nobody knew we were there. And I remember I think I called up had a burner cell phone, and I called and I said, hey, you guys getting any reporting on this Shia demonstration? And they go, no, we have nobody. I go, we're right in the middle. And
pucker factor through the roof. I can only imagine.
Yeah, well, it was, but again, it's one of those cases where your martial skills, when you're doing these kind of things that are one-offs, they're not standard military operations. It's not your martial skills that do it. You need. I think it's good to have that, and I was lucky that I'm old, or I'm a lot older guy. By now I'm in my late 40s, and I've got a lot of experience in a lot of countries and a lot of weird situations. And you can call on that experience to try to decide, is this a shooting time, or is this a talking time, or is this a running time?
Play it dumb time.
What is it? And, we didn't have time talking about Afghanistan to many times where it was shoot or don't shoot. Wait till they shoot, or I shoot first and be preemptive. Just so many cases like
I'll bring up one of those when we get to the questions that ends that I think people need to hear about, that I've actually got written down that folks will enjoy.
So that was Iraq, and I left in 2004 and went back to the Army, and the agency by this time, I had proven I could do some of the things that they do. So I had some people willing to sponsor me. And I just made to come in the agency. So I left there and went back to the Army in summer of 2004 and spent about 2 weeks staying in a barracks room at Fort Campbell and out processing the Army. And then I out processed on a Friday and showed up at the agency Monday to go to work. And I opted because I'd been doing, my career probably would have been a lot different and healthier and more successful had I chosen to go on the paramilitary or special activities side.
Branch.
But I went, well, that's one part of special activities. But I went on the regular side of where you recruit assets, and you're not necessarily going to a war zone. Matter of fact, I'd had enough of war by that time. I'd been in Yemen 98, 99 straight through, and then just through training and a little time for training and prep. Then I was on another classified thing in the Middle East for a year, all of 2000. And then you go 2001 and 2, I'm in Afghanistan straight through. Then I pull back, and now I'm in Iraq doing stuff in Iraq oriented 2002, 3, 4. And so now I was like, I don't want to, eventually I have to start getting older. And
Now you're going to be doing the stuff we actually think of the CIA doing, like you said,
yeah,
recruiting assets, surveilling, and the actual things we think of the CIA doing.
yeah. And the CIA regular officers don't do surveillance. You do counter surveillance to make sure you're not being followed when you do an operational act. But it was the regular case officers that were generally the people in charge of the teams, even on the jawbreaker teams, right? One, because it was usually them that had the language capability. The team leaders, not all of them, but some could speak Dari.
Some kind of dialect to get through and work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the geographic division that owns that kind of the command of that space. So they're going to put their officers
like Near East, the middle area. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So, yeah. So I showed up, joined the agency. And it's 3. Do we have any questions? Do we want to stop here and take questions, or we want to keep rolling?
I think we've got one dealing with people are pretty much listening in, and then I've got one that you can talk about a little bit later on that involves some assets that you're working with. But let's see. Were there third group guys that were a part of the task force in Anaconda?
That was 5th group. Of course, you had the famous participation of the SEAL team there, and Rangers there. We lost some 5th group guys to friendly fire. An AC-130 opened up because, again, we were just grabbing. When you go to some warlord, you're giving them all this pile of money, and you say, I need vehicles, because we didn't have any. It wasn't like the military and Delta and all that, where all your stuff gets shipped and flown in and all that stuff. We're first. You got to make do with what you can grab. And so when you give some warlord money and you say you need vehicles, he's going out and getting vehicles. I later started wondering how many vehicles got taken at gunpoint.
That was, yeah.
And then he's charging us $10,000 a pop for them.
That he just stole from some.
Yeah. So then we would go in and try to work on them and outfit them. Like I would always put recovery straps on the front and back and stuff that to try to help
pull or get it out if need be.
We could do ops out of them. You strip out the insides and equip them with fuel cans and anyway. But those guys were in a pickup truck, and the AC-130 thought it was a bad guy pickup truck. So they were trying to evade, but the AC-130 could track him. I think it was one of the 105 rounds that hit that truck.
Lord. Ask about ODA 574 and where was he on 12/5/01? Any inside intel?
Well, 574, I don't know where they were. That's 572, to my recollection, was the team I was with, and some of the guys were shown on that photo of the people at the OP. So 574, I don't know. Again, not mine. I kind of went in with Colonel Mulholland, showed up in Jalalabad, showed up in Coast. I didn't have a lot of information about the bigger things going on around me, right? I was pretty narrowly focused on get here, do that. And
okay. This might be before you do your 12501, I just dug this up on online. The story of Jason Amarine and
Yeah, yes,
OD.
and Marine. Okay, those guys. So they were in Helmand province, and that was again a friendly fire incident. There was an enemy, and these were the guys that were supporting the Jawbreaker team that was led by that Greg guy who I'd been in the Marine Corps with.
Oh wow!
He had moved from Gardez, or no, he came to me after because this happened before Gardez, and so President Karzai was with the agency guys that were with this ODA, and they were getting maneuvered on, attacked by I don't know, Taliban, Al Qaeda unit, and went to call for fire, and the Air Force CCT person gave the call for fire incorrectly and gave their coordinates as to my knowledge.
That's a B-52.
Again, I do not want to make the mistake of saying how I think things went, and you should always give the people on the ground the benefit of the doubt. But what I'm pretty sure that he made the mistake, and that round hit them. Because in that call for fire, you give the friendly locations and enemy locations. And that almost happened to me in Tora Bora when I was middle of night. You know, I'm red lens flashlight, figuring out coordinates where I want bombs to drop, and I had, I don't know if it was a super fortress, that or B1. I think we had some B1s then that had a bunch of JDAMs they could drop. So I was going to drop them, and you know, you're alone. A lot of guys. I'm the watch that's up, and while I'm up, I'm going to drop some ordnance, because everybody that flew over in the days of Tora Bora, any plane that had any ordnance left would always come to Tora Bora and say, "Hey, I've got this left on it. Where can I put it?" And we're going to drop it. And so he had a full run. So that was, I don't know if it was 11 or 8, however many JDAMs that was. And a JDAM is a 2,000-pound bomb. And so you're alone and you're figuring it out. And I think I jotted it down on a piece of cardboard so that I could read it back. And, you know, you give the enemy drop location, and I give the location of friendlies. And in this case, the friendlies were the other OP and me. And he dropped that first round, you know, to see if it worked. And it was right on target. So, yeah, I mean, that's that big giant thing flying 25, 30,000 feet in the air, right? And so there's a long turnaround. So he made his first pass, and he dropped that, and it was right on target. So it's about 15 minutes later, and yeah, it's like 3 a.m. I'm tired. It's going. And he comes back around, and he toggles me, hits me up on the radio, and I'm not using the Air Force. Just to be honest, I know that, yeah, I preferred to call in air myself. I did not. We'd had 2 incidences with 5th Group where the Air Force person did not do it properly, and people got hurt or dead. And so anyway, I did my own, and I'm not going to wake up the Air Force guy every time I want to drop something. And yeah, he comes back in, and now I realized I told you before about seeing the bombs fly beside us because they're going down in the valley. But there's a long delay from the time he releases a bomb until it travels the 25 to 30,000 feet in altitude, plus whatever horizontal distance it's going to go and hit. And he comes back in, checks in with me on final, and I go, same coordinates, same thing again. And he's Roger, and he starts reading it off to me, the coordinates. And I'm following along on my little piece of cardboard. And he reads off, when he gets to the part where he's reading the enemy location, he reads off to me the location. You know, I'm looking at the grid coordinates of the other OP. And you know, at first you doubt, did I hear that right? Did I hear that right? Because we've just lost all these teammates, you know, in Helmand. There was another accidental bombing, friendly fire incident in Mazar-e Sharif in the aftermath of the Mike Spann thing. And you know, in my heart, is like my stomach and heart jumped up in my throat, and I didn't think I could talk because I just was panicked, right? And so I double checked, and I'm like, abort. And I was afraid he was going to come back and tell me that too late, you know, because there's this long delay, and he was going to say it's gone, and I was going to sit there. And I wondered, well, will I have time to radio somebody to tell them to take cover or not? And that I was going to be the cause. I didn't think I did it wrong because I gave him the coordinates correctly the first time. And the second time I told him just to do the same. But then I don't know if he just read it wrong, but he double checked himself. And then he said correction, and he read the right coordinates for the target. So, you know, so he dropped the rest of the ordnance, and it hit where it was supposed to. But yeah, for a few seconds there, it was a really horrible feeling, like, you know, like you're getting ready to watch a horrible car crash or something. And but it didn't happen. So
thank goodness. Yeah, that was all the questions we have at the moment. Did you have a few more, or had we finished up? I thought if you were finished up, I thought that part where you were playing a Canadian reporter and interviewing two guys, I think they were suicide bombers or something. I forgot that's a pretty intense one.
Well, that's just so. In 2004, I came to the agency as a staff officer, started with all the admin stuff, eventually got myself certified after they made me do other stuff for 6 months. And then I got to the school that got me certified to be officially blessed as a case officer, conduct case officer work, recruiting spies in the agency. And my plan had been to go serve in an embassy somewhere away from wars. But the day I graduated, my personnel section sent me an email, said, "Hey, congratulations on graduating. Please come by our office at your earliest convenience regarding your assignment." And I showed up, and they said, "Yeah, that assignment, an embassy, no, that's not you. You're going to Afghanistan." Yeah, but you know, I did Afghanistan, and I supported you guys in Iraq, and I did this, and now in my new career path, I need a regular. They go, no. We've had a couple people bail on their assignment. They're desperate, and when they found out you were available, they asked for you. So I showed up back in Kabul, and then I saw why I was assigned there, because the chief of all the agency stuff at that time turned out to be the same Greg who I'd been in the Marine Corps with, and who I reconnected with in Gardez, and who I worked with for the Iraq stuff, and now he's my boss in the agency. So it was a good way to start off, to have somebody that knows you and trusts you, to somebody that, while I was a case officer, I was a case officer, he knew me in combat. So we trusted each other implicitly. And so it was a good working relationship. And give me just a second, and I will talk about the suicide bomber thing. If you go to my website for viewers and pull up articles, there's one called Situational Awareness, and there is a photo there that will, at the appropriate time in this, oh no, that was the suicide car bombers. Sorry. You're asking about pretending to be a Canadian. Different story. Give me just a second. So yeah, the story you asked about then was at one point, I did some ops in the Netflix series Spy Ops, and that episode 7 of that talks about some ops did in 2006-ish, 7-ish time frame that involved using Taliban people. So part of the aftermath of that, me getting these guys to work for me, we set up a fake, Taliban cell that we had in Kabul. And at one point, the Taliban in Pakistan sent 2 suicide bombers, and this cell that we had set up was going to be the host for them and hold them until they went out and did their mission. They were suicide vest wearing guys, and they showed up, they had suicide vests, and they weren't the guys driving the vehicle. And the guys that received them, it took away their vests and hosted them, then treated them decently and started trying to get info from them. And eventually, to get me in front of them, we decided, how can we do that? And I decided that I would pretend to be a person that would write a story about them before they martyred themselves, and that I would wait till after they martyred themselves, and I would print their stories and their names and make them famous around the world and tell their story. And of course, I couldn't say I'm an American, so I claimed to be Canadian. Again, I didn't have any documents, just a BS story to tell to country kind of guys. And yeah, so I went to this place that I had these people stashed and came in and met them. And it was cold. There's no heat. We had, we'd buy these little diesel drip things to heat rooms. So there was some of that, and it was cold. I would, again, had a blanket over me. One of the guys, the youngest guy, I think one guy looked to me to be older, 19, 20-ish, maybe older, a little bit older, and then the other guy seemed to be about 15, 16, something like that, young. And maybe as old as 17, but no, somewhere between 15 and 17. And he was cold, so I took the blanket off of me and I put it around him and just started talking to him and trying to get their life story, and then move them after talking about themselves and why they were doing, how they got recruited, how they were trained, the details of them being sent in. So just get what story we can. At the end of that session, I felt it was enough for one day to just try to get them to trust me. And then I got ready to leave, and the guy started to take off the blanket, give it to me. And I said, no, you keep it, it's yours. And I left. And of course, then later from the other Afghans I had manning that place, they told me that, wow, that's the first Westerner we ever met. And we were told how evil they are. And that guy seemed like he was real nice, and he understood Pashtun Wali, which is their tribal code. And he was kind. And they said, it's a good thing he was Canadian, not American. Right? But their vests had already been taken away from them, so they didn't realize there wasn't anything they could do. And by the way, I had some of the CIA bodyguards had come in with me, and those guys didn't know it, but just on the other side of the door, there were two guys armed to the teeth, ready, if I said a certain word, ready to come crashing in and shooting. So
Wow.
We were covered. And then I went back a few more times and met with those guys, each time talking to them about their life and what would give a life a meaning, and to the point that I developed trust with them. And eventually I told them, hey, I'm American, and I work for the Intel thing. And I ended up giving them some money. And then sending them back to their home villages to start a new life. We gathered information about the process of recruiting and training suicide bombers. We used them with the Afghan government to publish some stuff about manipulating poor innocent people into being suicide bombers, to try to do like a public campaign thing. That's how we worked with those guys.
Wow. Yeah, that's an absolutely crazy career. I mean, each interview we've done, I mean, could really be a movie on itself. It's unbelievable. I'm looking here to see. Yeah, guys, I've linked Mr. Gary's website into the show notes, and I just put it in the comments. Y'all should check it out. It's got a lot of great stuff on
Well,
it.
that other suicide bomber thing was when I about got blown up by one and that's in that article on my website under article. It says, I think it says situational lessons and situational awareness. And that was one. I was waiting to meet somebody that I was evaluating to see if they had any intel use in the city of Kabul, and standing on a corner, probably somewhere I shouldn't have been. I was not exactly within the rules for me to be, and I was not wearing what I would have been required to wear as far as safety gear goes. But I was there, and I'm on the alert watching for people to walk up. It was a busy circle, and paying attention that nobody's going to come up and try to kill me. And off to my left, in an unusual place where cars aren't supposed to be, there was a black Toyota sitting there. So I keep doing my situational awareness, scanning, looking around. Kept seeing this car, and it kept bothering me. And it was like 30 yards from me, and it was myself and an interpreter. And this is covered in that show, Spy Ops. And eventually I looked at the car like, well, you're not supposed to park there, but there was a cop, an Afghan cop, like 10 yards from that car, and he wasn't moving them. So I thought, well, it must be okay because he's there. And then I looked in the car, and there were two dudes, and they saw me. We looked at each other, and I stayed. My gaze kept coming back to that car because something about it just kept bothering me. The guy I was waiting for eventually showed up. I turn around, we walk back, start going through security checkpoints and into the protected area out by the U.S. Embassy. And as we got just inside the embassy gate, there was a loud explosion, ground shook, and it turned out, they sounded the alarm. We were locked down for a few hours. It turned out that there'd been, at that intersection I'd been standing at, right as soon as I turned around and walked away, a U.S. military convoy came down, approached that circle. And at the circle, that black car had driven into it and was full of explosives. And it killed 2 U.S. soldiers, injured 4, and killed like 14, 17 Afghans. Were all the people that were standing around me like 2 minutes before. And it was an interesting lesson for me because for several reasons. One, your spidey senses, your situational awareness tries to warn you, right? I kept thinking there's something wrong with this car being here, and I kept ignoring it because I wanted to meet that guy and do my job. So I kept convincing myself to not listen to what my instincts were telling me. And after, in the end, I've often thought about, it's like flipping a coin, right? I'm sure those guys, you could have made me, I wasn't wearing local clothes because I worked in the embassy. So I'm clearly an American, and their job's to kill Americans. And what if they thought that convoy and that no convoy would come by? And what if they thought we might miss our chance? We can kill an American right now. And all they would have had to do was touch the 2 wires together, and everything would have been obliterated. When you look at that photo, and if anybody searches on their Google, you'll find other photos of that. everything anywhere around there was blown to smithereens. The spot I was standing was just gone, and the big giant tree I'd been standing beside was mostly gone and on fire and burning. Yeah, I often wondered, like, what made those guys flip that, when they flip that coin, do it now or try to wait for a military convoy. How many times did that come up with, in my favor in those minutes that I stood there, right? But that's, again, man upstairs had different plans, and it wasn't my day. So
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's yet another crazy story. Well, I believe we've gotten here to the end, and I'm looking through questions, but everybody seems to be glued in. I'm sure I'll get some either by email or through social media, and I'll link your social media to where guys can reach out to you if you've got any questions, or I'll just send them directly to you. But is there anything you'd like to say before we shut down for the afternoon?
no, I mean, I appreciate you having me on to, we've worked slowly and methodically through what turns out to be close to 30 years, 35-ish years of this kind of, stories and stuff. And I know it's a lot and a lot of detail. And we haven't even got into all the other agency stuff, which, we may or may not get to. Though these are most of my episodes in war zones. There's a special coming out later this year that has another pretty cool mission that I did with some ground branch guys in 2007, probably, that will be talked about in that show. But yeah, happy to answer any questions. It just, it is, look, I did a lot of things because I was pushed. I don't have the experience that a lot of the folks you see on a lot of shows that have, these really harrowing combat stories about getting shot up or wounded or in these big firefights. That's not how it worked out for me. And most of my ops were intel related or pilot team related. When I was doing the thing into Iraq before the war, the agency told me two things. They said, okay, we're going to trust you to be in charge when you're out there doing tactical stuff. You have two things: don't start the war early and don't get anybody killed. So you're not looking to get in a firefight when you're doing some of those things, but you're prepared if you do. And I think that my widely varied military experience and life skills all combined to make me effective in those uncertain environments where it's kind of Wild West. You walk in, you're prepared to either shoot your way in or shoot your way out, or talk your way in and talk your way out. And, it's kind of like one of my favorite scenes of movies of all time is the Clint Eastwood scene in the Josie Wales, where he's with the Indian and he says it can be war or peace, my life for your life, and I'll either fight you till we both die, or we can have peace. The choice is yours. Yeah, and I would say, in a way, I was lucky enough to be able to live that sort of experience out. And it's not the typical experience that an SF guy, Delta guy, or whatever has. But it is I played the cards that were dealt to me in my decades of doing my best to go to exciting, dangerous places and do things. And, and that's how it turned out. We each have our own unique story. And that's the one that was ordained for me and set the tone for the things that happened later. Right. So, yeah. And I appreciate people for listening and putting up with it this long without all the excitement of a blood curdling, up close, shoot it out story.
Well, we've enjoyed it, and yeah, I mean, we definitely still have some stuff to cover. We could definitely here towards the end of the month, once I get through with some of the stuff that's already crazily booked up the next 2 weeks, maybe we can share a few more of your later CIA adventures.
Sure enough. Well, Bud, I appreciate you having me on, and good luck to you. I hope you get that new cat settled.
She's in there
All right.
waiting to get fed. Shit, that's what I keep looking to the side. I hear crying. So
Yeah, and appreciate the audience and people watching. If you will look at my website, we are after like 3 years of work, you're going to see we're launching an online course called Prudent Parenting, which is going to take. I took all the things I learned. We talked about situational awareness, about what it takes to live in an uncertain environment, and how that you can live a life where you're watching what's going on around you. Look at our world today. Look at the riots going on, the animosity people have towards one another, random violence. It's not a safe world anymore. But a lot of average people don't have the experience or training to be able to put principles and procedures in place to keep them safe. And it's not always that I'm carrying a pistol or I'm ready to use martial arts to fight. There's other techniques you need to learn about: conflict, escalation, de-escalation. You avoid or mitigate a threat before you have to fight your way out of it. There's a whole range of ways. When I go to a public space, what are the steps that I take for me and my family to make sure that if I'm in a movie theater or I'm in a stadium or I'm in a restaurant or a food court and suddenly a mass shooting starts occurring, I have a plan. I know what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do my family. And those kind of things that I took the lessons from living in these kind of places, and sometimes with a family, and put them into this system that I call the power of prudence. And so we have this course we're going to offer that goes with parents to help them mentor these principles and techniques into your family, and teaches you how to make being safe fun and interesting and not scary where you're scaring little kids. But my kids know how, what to do in a public venue and what they look for when they get there, when they're standing, where to stand, and what to do if there's an emergency. I invite people again. It's called Prudent Parenting, and you'll see on our social media that we're going to offer early access discount for that course there. And I hope to work out something with you to get you promote that too. And so we'll figure something out on that. But please just be on the watch for it. Prudent Parenting.
absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll be getting something set up for another round of adventures with Mr. Gary, and hope all of y'all have a wonderful day. And whenever y'all watch this, wonderful weekend or what have you. So thank you for joining, Mr. Gary, and we'll catch you down the road.
All right. Peace out.
Yes, sir. See